You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 31st of July 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Briefing, in association with Addis. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. Coming up on today's programme, Côte d'Ivoire's president says he will seek a fourth term. But does the decision risk fostering instability in Francophone West Africa's largest economy? Then,
I'm Chris Chermak, and I'm at a conference in Helsinki trying to recreate the ideals of Western and Eastern leaders meeting some 50 years ago.
More from Chris later. Carlotta Rebello will join us with a roundup of urbanism stories, plus...
Hello, Georgina. I'm Fernando Augusto Pacheco, and for today's Global Countdown, we head to Nigeria, which is one of the most exciting music markets right now.
All that right here on The Briefing with me, Georgina Godwin. Let's begin the show in Côte d'Ivoire, where the president has confirmed he will be running for a fourth term in October. Alassane Ouattara is 83 now and has brought peace and prosperity to this country on the southern coast of West Africa. But could he risk it all by refusing to move on? Well, I'm joined now by Monocle's Paris bureau chief, Simon Bouvier. Simon, many thanks for coming on the show. Côte d'Ivoire is Francophone West Africa's largest economy, but it wasn't always this way. And I wondered if you could tell us some of the history of the country, which gained its independence from France in 1960, and how that economy turned around.
That's right, Georgina. I was there this past May to visit Abidjan, and I have to say that that period of post-independence economic prosperity that was known as the Ivorian miracle, the miracle ivoirien, seems to be having a bit of a renaissance since the end of the last civil war back in 2011 when President Ouattara first came to power. But I think, to your point, the parallels between Ouattara and independent Côte d'Ivoire's first president, Félix Houphouët-Boigny, they're not like for like, but there are some parallels. And the one that is most worrying, I think, to a lot of observers is that even though after independence there was this kind of prolonged period of economic prosperity carried by Côte d'Ivoire's cocoa trade, they're the number one producer of this bean, and they supply or have a hand in making most of the chocolate around the world with their raw materials, and that's the source of one of the principal sources of their wealth. I think now the economy is much more diversified thanks to President Ouattara's able management and governance. But just like Houphouët-Boigny, the original president of independent Côte d'Ivoire, he's been in power for years now, and if he wins this fourth term that he has said he's running for, it will be 20 years of him in power. And last time around, decades of the same president led to political chaos.
As you say, you were recently there. You reported for our latest publication, The Entrepreneurs, and in the piece you wrote, you speculated whether Ouattara would stay on because he previously said he wouldn't. Why do you think he's done this about turn?
Well, to be fair to him, he had a designated successor the last time, ahead of the last elections. I think the most charitable interpretation of his behavior is that he wants to make sure that he gets this transition right because the last ones have been so difficult, right? And he had a designated successor, his prime minister, back in 2020, but just months before the election was due to go forward, he died. This prime minister had gotten a heart transplant in 2012, so his health was a bit fragile. Just a few weeks after he returned from a medical stay in Paris, he got dizzy during a council of ministers, and then he passed away shortly afterwards. So there was a real kind of cas de force majeure, as you would say in French, for him to say, you know what, since my chosen successor can't run, I'm going to step in. But this time he didn't make any efforts, I don't think, in my view, to make sure that there was a possibility for somebody else, even from his own party, to step in.
Because the former Credit Suisse CEO, Tiani Thiam, was due to run, but he's been banned from doing so. Is that a political move?
Well, it's a complicated one, Georgina, because you're right. Former Credit Suisse CEO Tiani Thiam was set to run for president, but he was ruled a few months ago by an Ivorian court to be ineligible to run for office. That's because Ivorian law prohibits dual nationals from registering to vote, and anybody who is not on the voter rolls can not run for president or for office either. So the kind of president and his supporters say, we have nothing to do with this. We have an independent judiciary in our country, and they're just applying the law. And it is true that Thiam was a French national since the 1980s, and he just happened to be on the electoral list in spite of the fact that the law says that that's not allowed, and that's why he was barred from running. But I think there are a lot of complaints that it's kind of convenient, the timing of this disqualification, and he has demanded to be put back on the voter rolls. That has not happened yet and is unlikely to happen, according to observers, between now and October, when the vote is set to take place. So, whether this was a move from Ouattara to make sure that his most serious opposition was out of the game, or if it was a carelessness on the part of Thiam, is up for debate. But what is not is that there is no serious, really, opposition to Ouattara, so he's the overwhelming favorite to win in October now that he said he's running.
And how is the prospect of a fourth term affecting the economy? Are people taking fright?
Well, I think it's a little early to say, but I do think that he is a darling of the world of business. He's the former number 2 of the IMF. And, if you look at his governing record from a macroeconomic perspective, it's unequivocally a huge success with continued economic growth, low youth unemployment, which is a huge policy issue in West Africa. I think it's going to be interesting, I think, to see whether he can use this fourth term, if he wins it, to prepare what comes next. I think that's the big worry. He's 83, as you mentioned in your introduction, Georgina. Can he make it through another 5-year term? There have been a lot of questions about his health. He has addressed them specifically by saying, my health allows me to do this, so I will run. But what if, God forbid, what if something happens during the next 5 years? If all goes well, he will leave office past his mid-80s. But if not, there could be political chaos if he needs to be replaced at the drop of a hat.
And I mean, as you said, of course, the country's done very well economically under him. I wonder if he risks his legacy by staying on.
I think so, Georgina. I think it's not a guarantee that he's throwing his legacy away by running again. I think if he's able, again, to use this fourth term, if he wins, to really make a concerted effort to not just continue the policies that have led to this incredible increase in prosperity, I must say concentrated in the economic capital, Abidjan, where most of this progress has been seen. There's a real issue of making sure that this economic progress reaches every corner of the country and that the country as a whole becomes less unequal. But the real thing is going to be the transition. Is he going to be able to use this time to make sure that there is a peaceful transition of power after he leaves office? And I do think it's a gamble to count on the fact that he's going to be able to manage that over the next 5 years, considering that he's already 83.
Simon, thank you very much indeed. That was Simon Bouvier, our Paris bureau chief. As he mentioned, he has recently come back from Abidjan, and you can read all about it in our latest publication, The Entrepreneurs, which is out now. Now, here's Laura Kramer with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Georgina. Ukraine's parliament has voted to bring back the independence of two major anti-corruption bodies. All 331 lawmakers back the move after days of protests and pressure from European leaders. The bill now goes to President Zelensky to be signed into law. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says his country plans to recognize the state of Palestine at the UN General Assembly in September. The decision will depend on reforms in the Palestinian Authority and follows similar steps by France and the UK. And a storm is brewing in Kenya over tough new plans to control alcohol sales. The government wants to raise the drinking age from 18 to 21 and ban alcohol in supermarkets, restaurants, and public transport. Critics say the move could hurt the economy, but officials argue it's needed to fight youth substance abuse. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Georgina.
Thanks, Laura. As we've been reporting in our news bulletins, a radar-related fault in Britain's air traffic control system halted flights for over 4 hours yesterday, hitting major airports, including Heathrow. That was across the UK. Thousands of passengers were affected, including our senior news editor, Chris Chermak, who joins me now from Helsinki, but really only just. Chris, your trip to Finland began with absolute chaos at Heathrow. Tell us more.
Well, yes, it did begin with a certain amount of chaos. I do have to say that I was maybe one of the lucky ones. My flight to Helsinki was just about to take off, or we were boarding at the point where all of this started. There were radar issues and problems with air traffic control across the UK. So we were all pulled off of the plane again. But that said, when, it only took about half an hour, it's amazing what half an hour can do in terms of causing chaos at an airport. Flights, the actual air traffic control problem was only for about 30 minutes, and then flights could start taking off again. So I was lucky enough that my flight was only delayed for maybe an hour and 15 minutes. Many other people had to wait far longer than that. As you say, some of the chaos lasted at least 4 hours, if not longer.
Well, you finally got there, and you're there for a conference. Can you tell us what it is and how it connects to 50 years ago?
I am at a conference called the Helsinki Plus 50 Conference. There you go, 50. It's in the name. And the idea of this conference is looking back at a special summit that took place 50 years ago, where you had leaders from both East and West joining. You had President Ford and Brezhnev of the Soviet Union joining, along with various countries in Europe from the East and from the West, to sign this pact that was called the Helsinki Final Act, that laid down a series of principles about things like human rights that hadn't really been discussed before, particularly with the Soviet Union, principles of sovereignty, of protecting sovereignty, things like that. So this was a very special conference, and one of the ironies, many ironies, about now doing a conference 50 years later here in Helsinki. The planning for this conference, Finnish President Alexander Stubb, who spoke here, said began in 2021. So he acknowledged that there's a strange aspect to this, right? In 2021, they hope to restart, have a conference 50 years later that would be about how things have changed, how the world has come together somewhat 50 years later in respect for human rights. Then the invasion of Ukraine happens, and Stubb has to acknowledge the world has changed. So this conference is very different. Much of the tone of the conference is about essentially holding Russia to account for its actions in Ukraine. It's much more about that than in any way sort of having Russia participate in a conference like the Soviet Union did back then.
I mean, presumably there is no Russian presence.
There is actually a Russian presence. So this conference is also linked to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE. That was sort of born out of Helsinki back then as well, a number of decades later, but the idea was seated there. And Russia is a member, so there is a Russian delegation here. But unlike 50 years ago, they're keeping very quiet. They're not part of the official proceedings, if you will. They did not give an opening speech where, Volodymyr Zelensky and others and the head of the UN, Guterres, spoke as well. And I did ask the Finnish Foreign Minister Valtonen, who's kind of chairing this whole meeting because she's also chairing the rotating chair of the OSCE this year. I asked her about that, the fact that this conference is happening in the middle of Donald Trump's deadline when it comes to reaching a ceasefire in Ukraine. I asked her whether there were any contacts with the Russian delegation, whether she was trying to push for any kind of meeting between Ukrainians and Russians as well as things happened 50 years ago. Let's have a little listen.
In the same spirit, we gather here today that this is not a gathering for just the like-minded, even though I shall say that today there are many more like-minded countries among the OSCE participants than there were in the year 75. At the end of the day, the biggest power which lies in this organization is its ability to bring people together around the table and enable dialogue, even though it doesn't perhaps lead to any new principles or new solutions at this moment. But I think that is the true strength of the organization.
Chris, some important guests are not in fact around the table, but on live video message, like Volodymyr Zelensky.
Yes, Volodymyr Zelensky spoke by video message. He spoke of the attacks that were happening once again in Ukraine and Kyiv last night. He spoke about the need to stop the war, obviously. He was conciliatory towards Europe and the US, talked about the importance of being on the same page and of holding Russia to account. He made a point of saying now is the time to freeze Russian assets, for example. And then Foreign Minister Sybia of Ukraine is also here. He's here in person. He held a briefing together with the Finnish Foreign Minister Valtonen, and he went a little bit further, I would say. He was maybe less conciliatory than his own president, talking about the idea that dialogue as espoused by the OSCE in Helsinki 50 years ago has failed, that this is the main principle and that it is now time to take this organization out of the dead end that it finds itself in, as he put it. So he really pushed for this support for Ukraine, but also the importance really of holding Russia to account, but talking to leaders here and saying, we have failed at this, we have to do better.
So what lessons then have been learnt from the last 50 years and that can inform the next half a century?
You know, it's interesting being here in this moment, right? Because as I said at the outset, I think when you listen to Alexander Stubb, the Finnish president, you almost feel like this meeting was perhaps something of a missed opportunity. If it had come, I don't know, a year from now or at some point when ceasefire talks were properly underway, maybe Russia could have been invited to participate in some way as well. All the talk here is of the need to revitalize dialogue, to recommit to the principles of human rights and all of these kind of things that we're missing in the world today. Gaza was even mentioned by a few people here as sort of the double standard that is happening in the world when you have Ukraine and Gaza at the same time. But at the same time, you know, it has to be said, Georgina, this conference, the fact that we're doing this 50 years later, but with the focus on trying to hold those who are violating human rights to account, really highlights that we're not actually there. We don't really have that clear idea yet what the next 50 years are going to hold. It's a time of extreme uncertainty.
Yeah, Chris, well, also the next 24 hours, I hope you have better luck with your flight back. Chris Chermak there, and you're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. And it's time now for an urbanism roundup. And who better to do that than the woman who looks after The Urbanist, Monocle Radio's executive producer and senior foreign correspondent, Carlotta Rebello. Carlotta, hello.
Hi, Georgina.
We were just talking nails, weren't we?
Hey, that is very important. And maybe it is a city's indicator of thriving businesses.
Absolutely. No, I think there could be like a sort of manicure index. And the better, the smarter people's nails are, the more shishi the city is, right?
Oh, I would read that index.
Well, let's talk about the world's safest cities index. So Abu Dhabi's been named the world's safest city for the 9th consecutive year. And just a little aside here, they have pretty good nails there too.
They do. So maybe it is correlated after all. Who knows? But yes, this is the latest numbers by Numbeo, who provide safety indexes and also crime indexes. And Abu Dhabi has once again been is at the top of the list as the world's safest city. Now, they assess residents' perception of safety during both day and night, and that is quite important to say, and also both in public and private spaces. And when looking at the list, there's a lot of cities in the Gulf that are at the top, which perhaps it's not surprising. We know that it is a place where, the right to privacy, security, the level of CCTV, everything contributes to a safe environment. But then when you go away from that, Taipei comes up at number 7, The Hague in the Netherlands, Tampere in Finland as well. And then we go to Slovenia, to Germany, to Switzerland, and that's just within the top 20. We also have Estonia. So a lot of the usual suspects there. But what I found interesting here is when you scroll all the way down to see, okay, then which city is the least safe in the world. It is the city of Pietermaritzburg in South Africa, followed by Pretoria in South Africa. Now, we know that South Africa historically has had issues with crime and violence, but what is interesting here is exactly that criteria. It is about residents' perceptions. So even though we know that municipalities, and Johannesburg is just a few steps away, so it's on the top 5 of the least safe cities. So the idea of despite the investment from City Hall, despite changes to police and urban security, the perception from residents still hasn't caught up with that. So it will be interesting to see over the next few years if we get South African cities to move a bit further up this list.
I noticed the first 6 are all Gulf states, and I wonder if that is related to the level of punishment for misdoing.
Perhaps it is related to that as well. We know that in the Gulf there are severe punishments for anything related to public disorder. Even the simple fact, if you take a selfie and some people are photographed in the background, you need to ask for permission. There is this idea of privacy, this idea of security. We often hear from our correspondent there that if he forgets an iPhone on top of his car, that will be there still the next day, and how often people leave cars unlocked. So we know it is a safe city, but at what cost?
Just before we move away from that, I see that Amadora in Portugal is at 105. It's not a city that I know at all, and I wonder what your perception of the safety of Amadora is.
Well, so it is a curious example. Amadora, it is part of the metropolitan region of Lisbon, but it is a city on its own. And I'm actually surprised it's not further down the list, because once again, it is a city where the perception of safety is very bad. It's often, a place where you wouldn't dare go. It has to do historically with, drugs and some impoverished neighborhoods. There's been a huge push to change that over the last 20 years, and I know people who live in the area, but the perception has not changed. And I think I keep coming back to this notion because it is so important. We know that these things take time, and often the reality of a place doesn't match its reputation. Amadora still is a place in the metropolitan region of Lisbon that has a reputation for an unsafe place. Is it still like that? I don't believe so. There will still be some crime. We know that is a given when you live in a city. When you live with millions of other people, it is normal that you'll have crime rates. But how long it takes from policies to being implemented, for crimes to go down, for that to be reflected on perception, it is a really long cycle.
So there is one way that this could be addressed, because of course when you're in a city centre, and perhaps there are drug users, perhaps there are criminals, but one way to get around that is of course to flood the area with great things and a lot of people who have no interest in harming each other by opening cultural experiences. And this is exactly what the Tate Modern on the South Bank here in London is doing. It said that it's going to be open late every Friday and Saturday in September. And it seems to me that relates directly back to that previous story. This is a way of making city centres safer.
Absolutely. Now, the Tate Lates, as they're known, this is opening, as you described, Georgina, the museum on Friday and Saturday late at night. This is something that they've done in the past, pre-pandemic, and it's finally coming back. And what is interesting is that this is perhaps the best tool that cities have at their disposal to activate their spaces and to activate spaces at night. We often talk about, night mayors, night czars, how to create thriving cities at night. And we tend to focus on the club scene or going out, which are very important parts. But cultural institutions play such a crucial role, because if the museum stays open late, perhaps the cafes and restaurants nearby that wouldn't see that much movement on those those days now will be packed too because people would want to grab a bite. And then that means that the bus that usually has 5 passengers now might have 30. So again, we go back to the notion of perception of safety. You then feel safe to go to a different area. And when we talk about, the importance of the nighttime economy, we often forget this point, that is the importance of activating spaces at all times of day. For example, you go to the City of London. If you go between 9 to 5, or let's say even 9 to 8 because people linger for drinks, it is thriving on business days, full of the bankers and all the other businesses around the city. You go there on the weekend or at night and it's dead. This is a place that was built as a thriving heart of London, and the City of London Corporation has really struggled with how to rebrand it. And it is again because they're not thinking about how the same place is activated at other times of the day. When you remove the workforce, what happens there? In the case of the City of London, a lot of restaurants close. Oh, the offices are not here, so there's no point. But perhaps you and I don't have time during the week at 5 p.m. to go to the City of London and would like to go on the weekend. But then if there's nothing there for me, and it's not just the City of London, there's other parts of the city that are like that. But that's just an example of how through cultural institutions and through this initiative like the Tate is doing, we can actually unlock the true 24-hour cycle of a city.
And if you want to whiz between cities that are buzzing late at night or indeed even early in the morning, the infrastructure or cornerstone of that is about to happen with the establishment of the Trans-European Transport Network. That's according to the EU Transport Chief, and key to this is Portugal.
Oh my God, Georgina, I never thought I'd read this headline about the high-speed rail within Portugal. So this is connecting the 2 major cities, Lisbon and Porto. Believe it or not, we do not have high-speed rail between the two cities. Now, this is a cheque of 875 million euros that has been issued by the European Investment Bank to start the development of the country's first ever high-speed railway. Now, this is not just crucial in about connecting the country, but it sets the first rail for us to be able to be connected to the European network. The goal is that eventually the Portuguese high-speed network can be tapped into Spain's, which is very robust, very developed, and therefore you have full connectivity within Europe. At the moment, Portugal is quite isolated in its own part of the world in terms of rail lines. We use a different gauge, so we're not able to be connected to the European network. So the high-speed rail line unlocks this. The potential for development is huge.
Carlotta, just before you go, I've had an absolutely brilliant business idea.
Please tell me more.
I think there needs to be like a nail salon / massage carriage on these intercity trains. Because can you imagine how convenient that is? You jump on the train, by the time you get there, your nails are done, you've had a massage, maybe a blow dry.
See, I've been saying the same about airports, because City Airport here in London has a nail salon. It's like, if you have a connection, that's perfect. Maybe we need to register Nails on Rails.
Oh, Nails on Rails, that's brilliant. Carlotta Ravella, thank you very much indeed. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Oh, that music indicates it's time for the Global Countdown with Monocle's senior correspondent, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. What do you have for us, Faye?
I have Nigerian music for you. By the way, Neon Rayos,
Isn't it fun? Isn't she clever? But look, isn't my manicure lovely?
It's lovely.
Yeah, okay.
I think you would do very well in Nigeria because... You know why I'm saying
True.
this? Because it's a very exciting country in the world of culture, in the world of fashion. In the world of music, I look a lot at the Nigerian charts. It inspires me to add songs to the playlist. A lot of our listeners will be listening to the next 5 tracks and say, oh, I recognize this artist because we play here on Monocle Radio. Starting at number 5, we have a collaboration of the ages. We have Tyler, which is a South African mega star. She's amazing. She just released an EP called We Wanna Party. Of course, it's an album for the dance floor. And this time she collabs with Wizkid, one of the biggest names in Nigerian music, with Dynamite.
See me, eye to eye, we go back to back, we go 9 to 9. Body on it, dynamite. Take you to my posy, we can finalize.
Backstroke on it, swimming in the kitchen till the bar.
It's an Afrobeat bonanza. I mean, what a duet. And those two, Thailand whiskey, they're big everywhere. It's not just in Nigeria or South Africa, so it's quite exciting.
Very exciting. What's at number 4?
Number 4 is someone that I didn't know, actually, but now apparently he's an emerging singer in Nigeria, so always good to discover a new name there. His name is Famous Pluto, and he sings this song with Zerodo and Shalip Poppy with Iwo.
Damn, I will be repassed to my shop. Okay, then see who's a Madonna. Landed the Balak Casimero. The ladies see me, they shot Ewo. Pluto, but president Ewo. When we enter, I'm a vet, me fancy meter. Me just play roads, I'm a bruta. Other ways for me very better.
That beat in the background is irresistible. Very much influenced by Amapiano, which started in South Africa, which is just this mixture of house music, jazz, and some kind of local music genres as well.
Yeah.
It makes us dance.
Now, the next one we know very well from our playlist. He is Burna Boy.
He's Burna Boy, and of course we have a nice story to tell after this song. This is his latest single, the very gentle song called Love.
Follow you standing steady fire. Now love me, I go love. Now love us, we go love. Who could believe you when the whole world is calling you a liar, liar? Now love me, I go love. Now love us, we go love.
And of course we have to add that Burna Boy was celebrating with the winning English team at the Euros, because he's the favorite artist of the UK team Sarina Wigman. To the English team Sarina Wigman, it's her favorite artist ever. So when he came out during the celebrations, she couldn't believe. She lost her cool, which is, I would lose my cool if I see Burna Boy as well.
Fantastic story. Now, who's at number 2?
It's a very sexy track, I have to say. Don't be fooled by the title. This is Ashak and Tiakola with Badman Gangsta.
I'ma gon' low, I'ma gon' go. This is my life, I ain't gon' lie, this is my shit. I said bad boy, real OT, stacking paper, play nicely, little messy. Thank God they are like more blessings, see clearly, I'm Gary.
And again, for this song, Ashaki, another big name in Nigerian music, he got Tiakola, which is, a very popular French rapper. And in this track, you hear English, Yoruba, French. It's quite the mix, I have to say.
Because, of course, Nigeria has so many languages as well. Igbo there as well, and all sorts of things. And great radio. And you need the radio, because I have to tell you, the traffic in Lagos is insane.
And radio, people ask me, if you don't know, how do you discover new music? It's not necessarily just with algorithms on Spotify. It's at the back of cabs everywhere I go. This is how you learn about new music.
Yeah, I had an Uber driver once who told me that he asks everybody who comes into his cab to name their favourite song, and then he puts it on his playlist. And so his playlist is completely comprised of the favourite songs of all the people that have been in the back of his cab.
5 stars wonderful. To him.
Yeah, and then it prompted us all to sing like a rhinestone cowboy all the way home.
I love that. I wonder if he's got any Nigerian music there for him as well. Shall we know who is number 1?
Absolutely.
It's another new name for me. Is a Nigerian-American DJ Tunes. So there's a little bit of Afrobeat, a little bit of Amapiano in there. And this time he's singing together with Wizkid, which we just heard at number 5 as well, and Fola with One Condition.
I deserve the love, so mommy. I dey feel I'm jada. When you don't, they want me, just bomb me. I go pull up jada. Don't they take the things you want? The won't go as now. I just want you tonight. I can't get enough. If you
give me a cocktail already, Georgina, because this song makes you dance, but not in a crazy way, in a kind of a sensual way, if you know what I mean.
That felt really cool, like you wanted a little umbrella and maybe a lounger there and just...
Absolutely. And I shouldn't say that actually the video was set in a strip club, but, these things happen,
Fernando, that was wonderful. So Nigerian music, what's our main takeaway?
Well, I think it's a very exciting music market. We play in our play. We have Tyler, we have Burna Boy in our Shake here on the playlist, and I think I might be adding others. Perhaps this track by DJ Tunes.
Excellent stuff. Fernando, thank you very much indeed. And that's all for this edition of The Briefing, which was produced by Laura Kramer. Our researcher was Henry King and our studio manager was Steph Chungu. And The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.